Hi there, and welcome to today's episode of A Different Way of Seeing, a podcast where we talk all things disability. I'm your host, Lois Strachan, and today I'm really excited because we're going to be focusing on an area of disability that I haven't given as much energy and time and focus to as some of the others. Today, we're talking about the world of those living with a hearing impairment, and we're chatting with Erica du Toit. Erica, it's great to have you on the podcast. Welcome to A Different Way of Seeing.
Thank you, Lois. It's really lovely to participate in this. I've often listened to the podcast, so for me, it's a real honor to be able to participate in one. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Well, thanks for saying that. So let's just start as I usually do by saying, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and your background? How you fit into this picture or this world of disability?
In terms of the world of disability, I work for and work with the Western Cape Association of and for Persons with Disabilities. I began there many years ago, and really it was a happy accident. I knew I wanted to do something that made a difference. I didn't in my head have the thought that I want to work in the nonprofit sector or even the disability sector. I just knew that I wanted to do something that made a difference in people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the position being advertised, and I thought, I have a history of disability. My mom's father, my grandfather, had 3 strokes, and I used to sit with him and help him with speech and a little bit of massage and exercises and so on. And then later, my mom had a stroke from which she never recovered. And I was there again, helping her with exercises, with the OT, showed me what to do. And so I do know that stroke runs in families, and I do know that it might be something that's waiting for me,
Yeah.
although I don't have high blood pressure. So stroke is quite close to my heart. And then, of course, I married someone that is profoundly hearing impaired. So, but that came afterwards. I was working at Western Cape APD by then already, and that's actually where I met Fani. So I must say it's been quite a road. It's been 30 years now, which I cannot believe. But the organization has grown, the sector has changed. What used to be okay to say in 1997 is no longer okay to say. And so there's been a lot of learning. And one thing I will say is that every time I got to a point where I thought, now I really know what I'm doing, then the goalposts moved. And then I had a whole different learning that I needed to go through. And even today, there's always something new to learn, specifically about disability. As you say, we're going to be speaking now about an aspect of disability that you don't really, well, you haven't really covered. And I find that a lot in my interactions with people with disabilities. There's always something that pops up that you just had no clue about before. So that's a little bit about kind of how I came into the sector, and I'm still happily working hard in the sector, and I'm likely to go on pension in the sector. So let's see how that works out.
Okay. Well, I I know that you are very involved in doing advocacy work and in the disability sector.
Mm.
What does advocacy mean for you, and how do you see on a day-to-day basis, what is the type of work that you're involved in doing?
So specifically at Western Cape APD, I do awareness raising, sensitivity training, advocacy, accessibility. So anything that falls into that. We have several projects on raising awareness. Um, I could go into those, but it might take a while. A lot of the awareness raising that I do is online using our social media. I do quite a lot of radio interviews and have a weekly slot on both Radio Tygerberg and Cape Pulpit, which needs preparation and recording time and so on. And then I also serve on the Western Cape Network on Disability, which really ties in nicely with the work that I do at Western Cape APD, because it is a voice of the sector, and it's a combined voice, and a lot of the work there is around advocacy. So I'm one of, I think, only two people on their board, which ties in so nicely with what we call my day job. So that's a volunteer position, but it ties in nicely with my day job. So, where other people perhaps have to ask time off to attend meetings, I don't. It's part of what I need to be doing. So inclusion is very important to Western Cape APD, the advocacy, and that really means the boring parts of it mean commenting on legislation, which can be really boring to read through copious pages of legal speak, but it needs to be done. And trying to get the voice out there, not because legislation says that it must be done, but because it's really the right thing to do. This. Everybody is human. Everybody has the right to exist in whichever way they want to and live their life. But sadly, that doesn't always happen for people with disabilities. And I find that's what makes me get up in the morning. Not to speak for people, but to stand with them side by side and help to get that message out.
I think that's such an important point, because sometimes as people living with disabilities, we discount the potential role that allies and supporters can have, and the power that they can bring in standing beside us. So we do see
Yes.
you, we do hear you, we do know that you are fundamentally part of the conversation that is important. So yeah, thank you for the work
And I
that you're
think,
doing.
I think I've mentioned it before that I don't in any way want to speak for somebody. I can't. I don't have that hands-on experience. What I can tell someone is, what is it like to live with someone with a severe hearing impairment? That I can do, but I can't tell you what it's like to have a hearing impairment.
Yeah.
I can tell you what it's like to care for someone that's had a stroke, and that needs a wheelchair to get around, but I haven't lived that myself.
Yeah.
So it is kind of what's the word? Kind of parallel to the experience that someone goes through. So over the years, I've gathered a lot of information. So I call it the theory around disability. I know all of that, but the practical experience someone else needs to talk about.
Fair enough. Well, today we're going to ask you to give us a little bit of information about a topic that I think you are very well equipped to talk about. Because from what I'm hearing out there in the world, you have been very involved in advocating for the use and the installation of loop systems in and around in venues in Cape Town. And this is a topic that I find fascinating to understand. It's a little technical sometimes, but I don't think we're looking at the technical side of it, perhaps. We're looking more at the impact, what a loop system is, and how it impacts on those who choose to use it. So just for those who have less contact with the hearing loss world or the hearing impairment world, what is a loop system? What are we talking about here?
It is an assistive device, essentially. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It is a loop. It's a wire loop that goes from a I call it a box of tracks because I don't know all the technical um, terminology, but it's the system itself, and it plugs into an amplifier, a sound system, and that loop you can run around a room. It's a wire that looks like a telephone wire, you know, the old landline telephones. It looks like that. You can put it around a room, you can put it around a few chairs. The very small ones go around your neck, and you can make it as big as you like or as small as you like. And once it's plugged into a sound system, whatever goes into that sound system through the microphone is fed through that wire and then inducted directly as digital sound into the person's hearing aid or cochlear implant. So there will be on the back of a hearing aid, there will be what is called a T function, which stands for telecoil. And as soon as that's activated, all the background sound is cut out, and you hear, I'm told, crystal clear digital sound. So there are times when I've been to the theatre, Barney and I, and he's actually heard better quality sound than I have, because those of us that can hear the people whispering, the pages of the program turning, the chocolate wrappers, all of this. And he doesn't. He hears that sound, pure sound. And it's the difference between access to communication and access to information and not. So it's not the only assistive device, but in those kinds of situations where you've got a speaker and an audience, so it could be in the theatre, it could be in the classroom, in the lecture hall, at seminars, those kinds of things are the best places for a loop system. And that's essentially what it is.
Okay. So you mentioned that there are other systems as well. Why a loop system as opposed, well, what are those other systems, and why is a loop system, or is it an and not an or situation that
And so, you know, your basic assistive device is a hearing device, whether it's a hearing aid, whether it's a cochlear implant, whether it's a bone anchored hearing aid, a Baha. That is kind of your standard basis that you need. But just giving someone a hearing aid doesn't mean that they can automatically hear again. It's still in ideal circumstances. But in, for example, a theatre or a church setting, often these are huge cavernous spaces. There's lots of people, there's a lot of background noise, and that person still cannot hear optimally. And so you need a system that will give you that access. And an induction loop system will do that. You can have, as I said, a smaller one at home. So we have one at home. Fani watches TV, but we have different sound. So I have sound through the TV, and he streams the sound from the TV. So if I switch my sound off, I mute it, he can still hear, and vice versa. And so it's really a win-win, you know. I can get up in the middle of the night and watch television and I won't bother him at all. And vice versa. He can watch TV with the sound off and not bother me. But then, of course, added to that are all kinds of other assistive listening devices and living devices, you know, the doorbells and the alert systems that essentially are like baby monitors and doorbells and telephones, things that alert you with a flashing light and not just audio. So really what you're wanting to do is take whatever's audible and make it visual. For you, it would be the opposite.
Yes. Yeah. It's getting things from the visual to the audio.
Yeah.
You know, I was just thinking my aunt has been a hearing aid user for many years now. And about a year ago, she was introduced to a Bluetooth connection device that
Yes,
works between her mobile phone and her hearing aid.
yes,
And suddenly it has become so much easier for her to hear conversations when I chat to her,
yes,
until the battery dies, of course. But
yes,
it's it's one of those situations where we really see something that others take for granted as a device being used in such a way that it makes a profound difference in the lives of people living a little bit differently.
yes, it does.
Um,
It does.
in,
And as I
in,
say, it's the difference between being able to communicate and not. So something I perhaps should raise is that there are Bluetooth systems that are coming forward overseas, but we don't have that technology in South Africa that the ordinary person in the street can use it. So there's also this thought that induction loop systems are old technology, but we also can't be bringing brand new technology in if ordinary Joe Soap doesn't have the means of gaining access to that.
and I think that's always has been, always will be the complexity of the situation, that there are always going
Yes,
to be new flashy devices that are cutting edge of technology, but are beyond the means of many of the people who need them most. And
yes,
particularly in the developing world, where we're finding that so often people with disabilities are unable to access employment, so income, and well, unfortunately, the reality is that disability has costs associated with it, be those medical
yes,
costs or costs in terms of technology. So it
yes.
becomes sort of a vicious circle of its own.
Mm, mm.
But it's we've spoken then about a number of the different devices, and maybe we can go into that a little bit more deeply because, as I say, I haven't had much opportunity to talk around the hearing impaired space on the podcast.
Mm.
So, some of the day to day devices that you have in your home, and I know I should be asking Fani this question, and hopefully I'll have the opportunity to
Yes.
do that, but to understand some of the ways that you, as a hearing person, some of the tools and techniques that you use in your part of your world that makes life easier for Fani. Can you chat to us a
I
little bit about
think
that?
yes. So obviously the loop system is a big part of it,
Mhm.
but he also has a Bluetooth device that he
Okay.
uses with his cell phone, and that's got a loop that goes around the neck. Um, and it's a little thing, probably not much bigger than a lipstick.
Okay.
And like you were saying, it connects with his cell phone. So it just makes it so much easier for him to speak on the phone.
Mhm.
There's also quite a few different applications for smartphones. So even for someone that doesn't have it, if he comes across someone just anywhere in the shops and he cannot hear them, he cannot lip
Mm.
read, they don't speak clearly enough, then he's got one or two applications on his phone that you
Mhm.
can open, and the person just speaks and it types out exactly what the person has said. And that's free of charge. You know, it's a free
Mhm.
download. They are amazing. And in the same vein, Windows 11 has a captioning facility that you can enable. Google has a captioning facility. So even now in this podcast, you can't obviously see it because it's only on
Mhm.
my side, but the captions are enabled. And that's just a standard for me, because when you're in a meeting with someone that has hearing loss, they use the captions as well. And oftentimes, if you don't speak with this English accent, then the words come out completely wrong. And then you know they're reading it incorrectly, and then you have to correct it itself. So captions are also a tremendous hearing device, or assistive device, should I say, particularly in online meetings. Things also like the television. So part of my work is also with the National Council of and for Persons with Disabilities, NCPD, in the Hearing Loss Matters project, which has been Fani's baby for all these years. And now he's mentoring one or two other people to take it over. And there's been a huge case around captioning on television broadcasts, news broadcasts, and public service announcements, because there is no access for people that don't use sign language. And of course, the sign language needs to be there because people use it. But there are the vast majority of people who have hearing loss don't use sign language. And this includes the elderly people. And there are two out of three over the age of 70 who struggle to hear. One out of three over the age of 60. And so when you have things like the budget speech, there's a huge chunk of the population. There's approximately 4 million people who struggle to hear, who don't use sign language. And so that is a barrier to information for them. And so captions is a wonderful way of ensuring that there is that access to what's going on in the world. You know, everybody wants to know what's going on in the world, although these days, sometimes I think it would be better not to know, but that's not the point. The point
is everybody should have the right.
Everybody should have the right.
Yeah.
Whether you choose to use it or not is
should be your choice.
But it must be, it must be available. And then, obviously, lip speaking interpreters, which look like sign interpreters, but they aren't using sign language. They're using gestures, and then they repeat everything without their voice. So we just say, you repeat it without engaging your vocal cords. And the person can read your lips, and then the gestures and the body language and the facial expressions help to get that message across. Because lip reading is wonderful, but you can only read 6 letters of the alphabet on the lips. The rest can be said without using your lips. And so you do need that extra support. And lip speakers aren't generally acknowledged, generally in the disability sector as a personal assistant for communication. But they exist, and they should be used. And then others, I think the most basic is grabbing a sheet of paper and a pen and writing out what the person wants. That's the bare minimum. And obviously, we've got the technology now, the applications on cell phones, but sometimes that is so simple that people don't think of it. So they would rather shout, and no judgment. I used to do that, shout, because you think, because the person's deaf, they can't hear, it needs to be louder. But that doesn't help, because it's often not because the sound isn't loud enough, it's because the sound isn't clear enough.
Yes.
And as soon as you start shouting, then sound distorts, and then it just melts down into a disaster. So a plain old pen and paper goes a long way to making sure you can get your message across, and vice versa.
Although there is the presumption of literacy. And I think that's
true.
Yeah.
True.
So
that is very true.
Just to, for the sake of completeness in the conversation, when we're talking about captions, can you just, my understanding is that anything that is heard is then also given in a text format on the screen. Is that correct? Is there more to it?
Yes, yes. So there are captions and there are subtitles. And subtitles is whatever dialogue there is appears on the screen. Captions is the dialogue, and then in brackets, sometimes italicized, I think the word is a description of whatever sound there is. So if a door slams or a telephone rings or a dog barks or a baby cries, then that appears in brackets. And that just gives a much better idea of what's going on because you'll have
picture.
dialogue and suddenly everybody on the TV will be looking one way and you're left thinking,
why?
But I don't know what happened. What are they looking at? Yeah. But if you know that a bomb went off, then that explains why everybody is looking to one way. So it gives that added explanation of what is happening, and that's valuable. And so for either of those, you can get closed subtitles or closed captions and open subtitles or open captions. And open is when it appears and you can't switch it on or off. Closed is when you can toggle between on and off. So back in the old days when we had videos and you'd always see at the back, it said subtitles for the hearing impaired. You could enable them, switch them on, or you can disable them. No pun intended.
Yeah.
And that actually is what legislation is calling for, is the closed captions. The problem that we have with it, NCPD and Western Cape APD, is that the closed captions require technology to be able to toggle it off. And again, ordinary guys in the street don't have that technology. So we're asking for open captions. It must be there. Whether you use it or not, it must be there. So that is the difference, really, between captions and subtitles. But you were correct.
It kind of makes me think of the similar work that's being done in the space of those with visual impairments around the descriptions, the audio descriptions, where we are being given information that is available to people who are visual, who can see things, that we are deprived because we are just listening to the text. So, the audio description side of things, I think, is a similar technology for those in the visually impaired space. But it's a fascinating and often frustrating world to be working in, to try and help people to see the importance. And I think some of those statistics that you shared are quite illuminating. Yes. From the perspective of the actual degree of our population who can and will benefit if these seemingly simple changes are made and included.
Yes. Interestingly, we did a social media campaign on the benefits of captions, and there were 8 benefits listed, and the very last one was that it helps people with a hearing impairment. And so it helps to support second language speakers. Yes. So if you're watching something and you don't quite, it helps with that. It helps to learn another language if you're watching in that language and you see it. It helps people like us. When you're watching a movie, sometimes there's so much going on that you don't always hear the dialogue. But there it is. And there are so many others, it's about legislative compliance, because that's obviously what is required. And there are a few others, but it's often seen as just for people with a hearing impairment, and it isn't. That's one of them. But and something that I also can't quite get my head wrapped around is the fact that if news broadcasts had captions, so many more people would watch it. And would you not want to broaden your audience? Give them the means to watch your broadcast, listen to your broadcast. But somehow that's not happening.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a no-brainer, but it's not happening. So that's why we do this,
Yeah.
so that people can understand the purpose of it and how important it is and how many people can benefit from it, really.
Yeah, the business case of inclusion. It
Yes,
is one of those things that should be so obvious, but
yes,
you try to explain that and it
yes,
all becomes apparently so much more complicated. But
yes.
maybe better minds than mine have reasons for that. But I can't get my brain around it either. So, what advice would you give to organizations who are wanting to make their products, their offerings, their services more inclusive for people living with hearing loss?
That's an interesting question. I would like to say ask people with hearing loss.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is also that not everyone with hearing loss knows about all these assistive devices. So in a way, we're also educating people on their own impairment and how they can accommodate
Yeah.
themselves as well as the rest of society. Um, but I think, and it's fine for us to say, put yourself in that person's shoes and try and navigate the world without hearing. But it doesn't get down into the finer points,
Mm.
things that you don't realize unless you really walk
Yeah.
that path. So I would say contact us, contact Western Cape APD, contact NCPD, contact even the network. The networks also become a lot more vocal
Mm.
around those kinds of other issues in terms of disability. And between those three organizations, there are a lot more, but those are the ones that I'm involved in. Um, then we can certainly help with advice, with guidance, with to families who are even struggling just
Yeah.
to know how to deal with this person that is losing their hearing and they don't know what to do. That we find also is a huge mixed bag of emotions,
Mm.
and people need support around that, peer support
Yeah.
around that as well as they do with, any other kind of impairment. You need to be in contact and communicate with someone who's already further down the road that you're already on, to answer those kinds of questions about, is there life after
Mm.
disability? And
Yeah.
there is, that's a resounding yes, there is, of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely, there is. Erica, if people would like to reach out to you to learn more about yourself and the work that you're doing, where would you suggest the best way to do that? We will share the links to the various
Yes.
organizations in the episode description and on YouTube as well. So people will have those in a text format. But what would you suggest is the best way for them to contact you online?
I think the easiest is by email. And my email address at Western Cape APD is awareness@wcapd.org.za. At NCPD, it's Erica with a C at ncpd.org.za. And both of those come straight to me.
Super.
And I
Thank you.
will obviously answer as soon as possible.
Great. Thank you so much for those. And as I say, I know you've sent me a number of different websites and things like that, which is fantastic as well,
Yes,
because people can then choose how they feel is best for them.
yes.
So as the final question, what advice would you give to someone who has recently received a diagnosis of either impending hearing loss or significant hearing loss, or a family member? Where should they start traveling that journey?
Okay.
What's a good
So
starting point?
always the first thing that we recommend is going to an audiologist.
Mm-hmm.
Often people around you will say, we think you're losing your hearing. And the first thing you say is, no, 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 you're all just mumbling. And on average, it takes about 7 years to actually
Yeah.
acknowledge that there is something going on. So the first stop is always to get a diagnostic evaluation
Mm,
from an audiologist or a similar healthcare practitioner, not the GP.
mm,
The GP cannot test your hearing. An audiologist will do that, and it's a painless,
oh.
non-invasive test. Um, and it generates what is called an audiogram,
Mhm.
which gives you a physical representation of where the loss is in terms of pitch and frequency and so on in your hearing. And based on that, then we can say, obviously the audiologist will sit with that person and say, this is the level of loss. They recommend having whatever assistive
Mm,
device. But there isn't a lot of rehabilitation services after that until you come to an organization like ours, which is where you will find out more about all these assistive devices and
mm,
how you can use it. And in terms of employment, we always say to people, go back to your audiologist and ask them for a functional report, because often they will give you a clinical report
yeah.
that really certifies that you have hearing loss. But us ordinary people can't read a clinical report. An employer doesn't know what that means. And so a functional report will say in the workplace, this person will be able to do the following tasks. They might struggle with these tasks, and these they won't be able to do at all. And that is kind of the process. And once you have those hearing devices, then something that Fani is a huge proponent of is oral rehab. So he often sits in a quiet space and he puts music on and he listens, actively
Mm,
listens. So it's not just music in the background, he's listening to where's the guitar line
mm,
going? Is it piano music? Is the piano going up and down? If it's orchestral, what are the violins doing? What are the percussions doing? Active listening. And that just helps generate action in the hearing part
mm.
of your brain, because sadly it's one of those things that if you don't use it you will lose it. So if you don't get, even if you cannot hear clearly with hearing aids, to get that, what do they call it, it's trying to get the message through,
Yeah.
means there's a little bit of action in that hearing center. So it might not be clear, but it's still working. So it's still having some kind of connection. And I think on the basis of that, in Fani's case, meant the success of the cochlear implants, because even though he couldn't hear clearly, he had hearing aids. So if the door banged, that reverberation came through, and that just kept the hearing part of the brain active, so that when the cochlear implants came, we say that's why it was successful. But as I say, action, active listening, trying to hear, and it does cause a lot of fatigue.
Yes.
Um, I think, any kind of exercise makes you
Yeah.
tired. And it's the same with listening to hear properly. So I think that is really what I would say, and a support system.
Mm.
But as I say, that we at Western Cape APD at National Council are there to provide that support as far as possible. So people are really welcome to contact me, and if I'm not the correct person for their particular issue, then there are other people that will be able to help.
Super. Erica du Toit, thank you so much for the information you've shared with us today. It's been really great to hear what you have to share with us, and I appreciate your taking the time to do so.
Oh
And
no, it's been lovely. Thank you so, so much.
great. And for those who are either listening or watching this on the podcast channel or on YouTube, thank you for being with us today on A Different Way of Seeing. And if you'd like to find out more about the work that I do, hop onto my website, loisstrachan.com, and you'll learn a little bit more about me and how to contact me if you are a potential guest for A Different Way of Seeing. I always love sharing stories of people working in and around the disability space or living with a disability, those providing services. So if you feel you have a story that is worth sharing, please hop onto the website and there is a way there that you can apply to be a guest. Erica, it's been wonderful to chat to you today. Thank you so much. We look forward to hearing more from you and hopefully from Fani as well in the future.
Yes, we'll keep you updated on what's going on. Thanks so
Super.
much, Lois. It's really been lovely. Thank you.